Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. And for those of you who are regular attendees of our SaaSMAX webinar series, you know that we always say good morning, afternoon, and evening because we have people listening to our webinars from so many different time zones. We can't assume that they're in the morning, afternoon, or evening when we have the actual webinar live. So welcome again, and we're excited to have our annual webinar hosted with CompTIA, the 2018 annual State of the Channel SaaS and Cloud Software webinar. Love hosting this webinar because there's so much amazing data that CompTIA gathers and puts together, and the way that they present it really helps drive how we look at what the future of tech is going to be in the industry. As a former MSP, I looked forward to getting all the data that CompTIA put together. And SaaSMAX loves to have this data because it enables us to bring on vendors and applications and help our resellers improve and increase their businesses. So just a little bit about what we're going to be doing today during the webinar. We're going to do a little bit of an introduction to SaaSMAX. We're going to talk about the technology channel and the IT channel. Then we'll go into the data for the SaaS channel, emerging tech, and growth trends. The way we do our webinars, is this is your first time joining us, is we will be taking questions at the end. Please use the question pane on your GoToWebinar question pane and type in any questions you have. I will be monitoring the question and chat panes, and if you have any technical issues or any questions that I can answer, please type them in, and I will be coming back on at the end of the webinar to ask the questions of our panelists. So let's dive right in, and I am Laura Steward, SaaSMAX Advisory Board member, iHeartRadio host, author, and former MSP, and I am so excited to be here today. We have Dina, the CEO of SaaSMAX, who I'll be introducing in one moment, and a dear friend, and Carolyn April, the Senior Director of Industry Analysis for CompTIA. So Dina and Carolyn will be presenting the rest of this deck. And Dina, come on board and let's get going and talking about how SaaSMAX drives B2B SaaS channel sales opportunities.
Great. Thank you, Laura, and hello, everybody, and particularly to the SaaSMAX ecosystem who has taken the time out of your day to come and hear about this really good data for you to help plan your businesses in the year ahead. I'm just going to go really quickly and give you a quick overview for those who are not already familiar with who SaaSMAX is and why we bring you this type of industry information year after year. And it's that we are basically the technology platform and service to enable SaaS vendors and SaaS resellers to come together and create recurring revenue sales opportunities in the channel. And we do it in two key ways. One is we have a service called Partner Optimizer, which is proprietary channel data analytics that helps companies who have channels or who are building channels to profile their existing partners and to find net new partners. And we use that same technology internally within SaaSMAX as a distributor, as a value-add next-gen distributor, specifically for B2B SaaS products. And in that regard, we're helping solution providers to find and pull together bundles of SaaS solutions for their specific vertical or their horizontal to service their clients better. And we're also helping SaaS companies in that regard be part of the solutions that the channel partners take to market. And our model is very much pay per performance, so we succeed when you succeed. And so our goal as SaaSMAX is to ensure that we're bringing the right SaaS emerging companies and existing companies to our channel partners and vice versa. So Laura, I think, yeah, the next piece is just to explain that how we do it. And we do it by really focusing in on the relationships that we form and identifying the right partners and pulling you together. So SaaSMAX as a next generation platform, we pull together the vendors and the resellers and enable them to do business together. And we now offer resellers the ability to have a one-stop web store or online market of their own that we power up for them with the products, the SaaS products that they actually are selling through SaaSMAX. And from that to that end, it allows the resellers to reach the buyers and end users and drive more sales, a bigger digital footprint, and more inquiries about the SaaS products that they have. And so it's pretty exciting. We have a lot of new and really cool innovations that are rolling out in January in the first quarter, and we'll be in touch with everyone who's in the ecosystem and beyond. And I think the next thing I wanted to share was actually a slide about our view of what the SaaS channel is and where it's going, because there's a lot of questions about that. And year after year, we look at where it is today, where it's growing, what it's capable of participating in regards to selling SaaS. And this is really where we've ended up. Today, the SaaS sector is approximately $78 to $80 billion. Could be more, could be less, depending on which analyst you speak to. We believe that approximately 20 to 25% of SaaS is sold through some form of reseller channel partner programs that are had. So that's about 17 billion today. Now we see that growing to about 43% of all SaaS sold by 2025. And in part that's because the SaaS, and that goes to 67 billion. And that's because the SaaS sector itself is going to grow to about 160 billion in sales. And from that, we think being able to get to market is going to require the SaaS channel, the IT channel, and the broader channel in order to reach their total available market. So, put us down, and we ourselves are putting money on it that we'll see the SaaS channel really take on a bigger piece of the pie when it comes to selling SaaS over the next 10 years, and we're excited to be a part of it. So now I'm going to pass the torch over to Carolyn, who has been year after year does great research on behalf of CompTIA related to the emerging trends for the IT channel in general, and we hone in typically with her on what's going on with the SaaS channel and the cloud channel so that you can get a better view of where things really are going from the perspective of channel partners. So Carolyn, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dina, Laura. So great to be here as always. Really looking forward, Dina, the things that you said there, I just have to, agree with you that I believe that the traditional IT channel, if you will, is definitely getting more on board with SaaS. And I think some of the numbers that you just presented are certainly on an upward trajectory. And, it's really about finding your place and where you fit in with SaaS and what business model is best for you to make the most money out of it. And I know that that's what you live and breathe. So what I'd like to do today is take sort of a high level look at what is going on in the channel in general. And this includes SaaS related channel players, along with the more traditional solution providers that we all know well and love. And based on the study, what I'm going to present today in terms of data based on two studies. So one is the annual state of the channel that we do. We just finished our 7th iteration a few months ago. And then I'll combine that with some very specific SaaS related data that we did a year before that will be a little bit more granular into the types of things that I think some of your listeners are going to be interested in. So we'll start with a top level market overview. Then I'm going to get into some of the services, solutions that companies are offering today. Take a little bit of a look at vertical specialization because that is important to a lot of channel partners today as a way to differentiate. Then I'm going to talk about new competitors, new partners. And what do I mean by that? I mean, many of you have probably heard about this alternative channel that is growing, and a lot of that includes companies that are doing a lot of work in the SaaS space, along with a bunch of other different types of companies as well. And the question that we wanted to answer at CompTIA is, are these competitors to you, or are these potentially new partners? And how can we make it more of a partnership type of relationship between old and new versus a competitive relationship? So we'll take a little bit of a look at some of the data I have there. Then again, we'll deep dive into the SaaS data that I do have. And then I want to end it on a futuristic note because we at CompTIA have done a lot of work this year on emerging technology. And this is very specific to the SaaS world because a lot of the technologies that we're going to talk about are cloud-based, and very much will be in the wheelhouse of many of these software players in the SaaS space. So it'll be good to see where the channel is today in terms of their adoption of some of the emerging techs that are very hyped out there right now, but what is the actual reality? Okay, high level. So let's just take a look at the IT industry right now. These are based on IDC and Gartner numbers, but the IT industry today is about $1.2 trillion in the US, which is darn big. And if you break it out by these very specific buckets, hardware, IT services, software, and telecom, you can see fairly even break, but software is really a big piece of it. IT services and software actually go hand in hand. So what we'll see later is a lot of companies that are doing a lot of software business are also making an enormous margin around the services that they can provide that go along with that software business. So I kind of lump those two together. We have seen, year over year, the decline in hardware in terms of the piece of the pie that it takes up. I never say hardware is going to go away, because I am talking to you on a laptop right now, and there are just some things that just have to be physical. So there will always be hardware sales out there. It's just become more commoditized in terms of a channel play, and they need to figure out other places to be able to create and generate more revenue for themselves, and that happens to fall in those other buckets of IT services and software. Alrighty, so let's take a look at what customers look like. So who are you selling to today? And this is a very classic pyramid of what customers look like. And really the sweet spot for customers in terms of, how many there are in terms of employment is going to be that small to medium segment. So they've got the most people by employment. Large business segments tend to have fewer establishments because they're much larger. So one IBM or one HP or one Cisco, is one establishment, and so we're talking about far fewer businesses. Of course, they generate quite a bit of business. And then, as you see down at the very micro segment, which is at the bottom of the pyramid, we have tons of small businesses. And when I say micro, we're talking about businesses that have 1 to 5 employees, which is why they're only 15% of the market by employment, because they have very few people who are working for them. But there are an innumerable number of those companies out there, and they happen to be very important to the overall economy, both the small and micro business segments. Okay, let's break down the US-based IT channel. So this includes the entire raft of channel companies that we normally talk about, and this is based on federal data from the NAICS designations that every company that is incorporated needs to fill out and identify themselves as. And really, the channel is very much a bunch of small companies, and that is the reality. And about 90+% of the universe of channel firms are about $1 million or less in revenue, and they employ fewer than 10 people. And there's lots of them. And that doesn't even include the whole subset that doesn't even get counted in the NAICS data of sole proprietor businesses. So you've got a ton of channel companies who are really just one guy who's doing consulting work or doing something, related to technology, but doesn't get designated by the NAICS system. So there's you look at these numbers; these are official, but then you've got hundreds more of these self-employed folks that make up the bulk of the U.S. channel. And given that all of the SaaS entrants are coming on board, we've got digital marketing agencies, which is a new type of channel company. We've got even non-channel firms, non-technology firms at all. They consider an accounting firm or a law firm. Those companies are beginning to sell technology. It's kind of like the world is becoming one big technology company. And they may not identify as channel firms, but at the end of the day, if you ask them what they're doing with tech, they're selling it, they're influencing it, they're referring to their customers. They are, in essence, channel companies.
And Carolyn, I just want to interject there that in the SaaSMAX world, we are getting to see a growing number of those peripheral, domain-specific channel partners who we refer to more as technology partners or technology channel versus IT channel, because they do include MarTech and FinTech and BI, business intelligence and data analytics expertise, and others in accounting and sales. So as domain experts are recognizing that they themselves can not just influence a sale, but become a reseller and benefit from monthly recurring revenue, there is a great opportunity for the SaaS applications, and particularly in any business productivity area, to be able to leverage the new and growing, expanding channel.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time. Don't limit yourself to what you think is the traditional route to market, right? It's now no longer linear. It's spaghetti all over the place. And there's so many different ways to take your product or service to market, and that includes, like you said, some of these peripheral or whatever term you want to put on it, type of providers who have taken, technology as part of their business today. And so it's important for some of the SaaS ISVs out there to think about alternatives to get their product to market and alternatives to whom they want to partner with.
Right. And that said, we're also seeing more and more of the traditional IT solution providers, whether they're managed service providers or MSSPs or VARs or agents, are starting to take on some of these business productivity solutions as well, because they're able to grasp it and also have the right people in organizations to talk to about it and turn that into a sweet spot for them. So we are seeing that more and more. And so therefore, for those who do get into the channel on the earlier side, they have a great opportunity to grasp the attention of those partners.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing the same thing with our data. In the next segment here, I want to talk a bit about, what are people selling and what are they doing? Where are the growth areas? So let's talk a little bit about solutions and services. In our State of the Channel study, we asked, what are you selling? And we rank ordered them. And these are the top 8 things. There were more on the list, but these were the top 8 that channel companies say that they are involved with today. They have adopted. And doesn't mean that is their only business. It means where they're probably generating their most revenue today. And I will say managed services is always been fairly high on the list. Consulting, that has been creeping up more and more, especially older hardware resellers are realizing that that's not a viable business model for them anymore. And some have just given up taking title. Some of the smaller guys have just given up taking title of the product altogether. And they'd much rather to hang a shingle and be a consultant on the business side of technology and on the technology side of technology. It can be lucrative. You don't need a lot of people, depending on how much you want to grow. So we see that as a big part of a lot of firms' businesses. And then, especially for the interest of this webinar, software as a service was much further down on the list in prior years. And it is now up there as one of the bigger revenue generators and services that are being offered by channel firms in the last year. And we asked a secondary question, what's of these things that are providing a lot of business for you today, what are the fastest growing? And it's managed services, SaaS, and jump down to custom application development. So software basically is what's going on here. And so in the year ahead, we expect software as a service to definitely be one of the faster growing markets for a lot of the channel companies. The other thing that a lot of channel firms said is we asked them whether or not they expected the mix of their offerings to stay relatively stable, or was it going to change based on new things that are coming down the pike, or based on the fact that they've identified that one of these is much bigger possibility for revenue than others. And a larger percentage of our respondents said they expect the mix of what they're doing to be changing in the next couple of years. And I think that is a recognition as we watch companies go on a business transformation, as they move away from hardware and more traditional reselling to recurring revenue, fully embracing the cloud, getting into SaaS, and getting into some of the emerging tech things that we're going to talk about later. So here are some more specifics on what companies are expecting in terms of their growth over the next 2 years from their offerings. And as you can see here, software as a service is way up there. It's the number 2 thing that growth is expected from. And I think it's interesting also, security is always important as our number 1 thing. And I think security has become an umbrella skill that has to be around everything, no matter what you sell. You cannot leave security at the door and say, go find somebody else to do the security. I just sell you networking gear, or I just sell you this type of software. It has to be something, at least for smart companies, that is incorporated into their DNA and everything that they do. And I think, Dina, you and I were talking about this earlier. A lot of what SaaS players are doing today is having a pretty strong focus on making sure that security is a part of their portfolio, whether they're selling a security application or whether they're doing security work around those application services that they're providing. But I think this is very good news for this community, that these 2 things are at the top of the list for growth over the next couple of years.
Agreed, absolutely. And we get those inquiries and have those conversations with the channel partners in SaaSMAX all the time. where they are specifically looking to find additional security applications as they recognize that it takes more than one security offering to become a provider of comprehensive security services to their clients. And that's such a key need right now that it's something that's driving them to realize there's an opportunity, but also in order to stay relevant and important and fresh with their clients, they really need that expertise.
Yeah, customers insist on it. They really do. I mean, they see a headline every day about some data breach or some other security issue that happens, and I think it freaks them out, and they're going to their providers specifically asking very, very deep security questions. And so if you're not a company that takes that seriously when you're going out to sell and have your salespeople be able to have a security conversation as well as whatever the prime product is that you're selling, you're going to be second or third in line to the competitor that actually can have that conversation.
Yep, agreed.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about vertical industries. We wanted to know what channel firms are focusing on today. There's been a real push to get into verticals as a way to specialize and differentiate in the marketplace. And so we asked, and the segmentation here is based on the size of the respondent. These are channel firms that responded. So these are small channel companies, medium-sized channel companies, and large ones. We just wanted to know, what are you focusing on today? And as always, professional services tends to be at the top. And not only are professional channel firms focusing on selling professional service solutions, professional services firms, as we talked about earlier, are actually getting into selling them themselves. Manufacturing has creeped, that's the biggest jump up the list. And I pointed out only because there's really one reason for that. And that is because manufacturing firms are really embracing IoT. And so they're starting to put it in their factory floors, and they're starting to have it, in their workshops or wherever it is. And there's a lot of opportunity for a channel firm to start to work with manufacturing, which used to be very low on the list. They were it wasn't a real tech-focused industry, other than sort of like, it's sort of the mechanical aspect of some of the equipment that they use. But now they're getting into all kinds of things, collecting analytics and et cetera. So it's kind of an interesting industry that has seen a big jump in interest. And so when we asked, how important are verticals to you in our study, 75% of the respondents said verticals were important. And then we drilled down and said, well, how many say it's very important to your business today? And that number dropped down to about 40%. So 4 in 10 said it was very important. And the way that I explain that is, I would say the 4 in 10 that said it's very important, those are companies that have made serious commitments. They're the ones that actually know the very niche applications that some of these verticals use, and many of them are cloud-based and SaaS-based, and they understand those, and they understand the business that they're talking to. So that's the difference between a channel firm that just happens to have a cluster of customers that are doctors' offices, but they're very horizontal in what they do for those customers, but they'll check the box. Yeah, we're into verticals. Verticals are important for us. But it's really that 4 in 10 who say they're very invested in verticals. They're getting into some of these application services and really understanding how those businesses run. And that is a clear differentiator among customers.
And Carolyn, I'd also like to acknowledge there that the verticalization of SaaS solutions is only really just beginning as well. We see occasional ones for hair salons or for religious organizations or for a retail organization, but the deep verticalization is really just probably starting, or we're seeing some of the vendors start to create some verticals for their horizontal applications. So I think that as the supply becomes more and more available, we'll see that grow as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, there's a lot of greenfield there that's been untapped. So I think going forward over the next 5 years, you're going to see verticals, especially in the SaaS space, become much more important. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this, what did you call it, Dina? Peripheral kind of channel? Well, these are the peripheral players who are becoming more and more of a force, to be quite honest. So we wanted to know from the traditional channel, who are you encountering in the marketplace that you didn't encounter 5 years ago? Who are, you're used to Joe solution provider down the street and et cetera, another MSP, but who are you now bumping into when you're trying to compete? And number one is these cloud-based ISVs and their partners, and that's your world here at SaaSMAX. And the other, which I mentioned earlier, were digital marketing agencies. You see some companies that are very vertically industry-specific applications firms. They don't necessarily have to be SaaS firms. That's why we differentiated them in this list here. And then again, not to reiterate, but we are seeing an increase in the number of accounting firms and law firms that are getting into the tech business. It's a reality. And so this is the new landscape, and it's expanding. You know, the good thing is we hear all the time about the aging of the channel. So the traditional channel is kind of getting older. It's just a fact. If you go to a channel conference, for instance, a lot of gray hair sometimes, and I've been around a long time too, so I don't take myself out of that category. But you wonder, what's the pipeline? You know, who's filling the pipeline for new channel companies and kids that are getting out of school or whomever? And some of these newer entrants here are going to be the ones that are going to build up that ecosystem. So we wanted to know, okay, these are the people you're bumping into. Are you competing with them, or have you actually considered working with them in some way? And as you can see here, a good chunk of the more traditional channel is saying, hey, at least occasionally I'm willing to work with, or I want to work with some of these newer entrants, which includes some of the SaaS players. And I think that's encouraging. I mean, 42%, and others that say, yeah, we're planning to do so soon. And then you get that 2 in 10 that are saying, yeah, we do so frequently. And you know, this is not a new concept, partner to partner in the channel. I've been hearing about it and talking about it and probably writing about it for a long time. But the reality is a lot of these types of relationships fail because they're not formalized, and they're handshake agreements. Like, hey, it's just an opportunistic thing where, oh, wow, I don't know how to do this. I don't have this. And you have that. And the customer's asking for both. And, you know, maybe instead of bumping heads, we can go in and try to do a joint sale together, and then we'll work on the engagement. And then, yeah, they'll identify as partners, but then they never talk to each other for another year, if they ever talk to each other again. So one of the things that we at CompTIA make sure we recommend is we really, really promote and think these types of partnerships are a good idea, especially as the more traditional channel is very infrastructure focused, hardware and the basics, security and networking, et cetera. And then you've got the newer players in the SaaS world who are very application specific in what they offer. It's more expensive in many ways to try to ramp up organically within your company to get the other skill set that you're missing, and maybe try to partner. But the big takeaway here is they don't work unless you formalize them, have some sort of contract written, make sure who's accountable when you go to market, do you sell together, and all of those little details, they really matter if you want to make these things work. Okay, so now we're going to get more specific about some of the SaaS data that we have. This is from a study that we did last year. And it was very specific in that we segmented out just respondents that actually are doing SaaS today. So these are not traditional companies that are trying to get into SaaS. They're already doing it. They have live customers and they're selling. And let's take a look at like some of the data and the reasons why they got into the business in the first place. And one of them clearly is customer demand. I think customers are driving a lot. Customers have become comfortable with the cloud delivery model. They oftentimes are self-provisioning applications on their own, or they're looking to someone who can help them figure out how to do that. A lot of them are self-provisioning applications and then figuring out, oh, I don't even know how to integrate this into the other stuff that I already have in-house, and they need help doing that. But the fact that customers are going, because they're bombarded with information and marketing collateral and advertisements about the cloud and the types of applications that they can get from the cloud. And frankly, as a consumer, they buy things off Amazon and they do all kinds of stuff. So it makes perfect sense that customer demand would be the #1 driver to get into this business. Now, from the provider point of view, a good reason to get into SaaS is because they want to get into the recurring revenue model. And that's no different than a lot of them wanting to turn to managed services over the years. It's a way to get away from declining margins on a lot of transactional type of business that they've been used to doing on hardware and other things of that sort. So that makes perfect sense. And then I won't go through every single one of these, but I'll go through the next two. There is a much faster time to deployment. I think, Dina, you could probably talk to that, is that it's a lot easier to get customers up and running real quickly. I think it's important, though, because the margins might not be as high in the beginning when you're doing SaaS. Is you need to get a high volume of customers, but you can onboard them really, really quickly. And that is definitely a benefit to a company that's just trying to get into SaaS. And then there are a lot of services opportunities, and we're going to look at that a little bit later, but a lot of money can be made around what you can do after the initial sale. And even if you're not involved, as I said, in the initial sale, but the customer self-provision slides the credit card on their own and gets the application, and then is like, whoa, what do I do with this? I need some help in figuring out how to take advantage of advanced features or integrate to other things in my environment.
Agreed. And definitely when it comes to, we have some stats, I don't remember who they are, so I'm not going to quote them, but basically the reduction of churn is substantial when you have a solution provider or expert who's helping them to purchase and implement the solution, because typically they will add more of the features that come with the application, and they'll ensure that the training and the utilization of the application is broader within the organization. So it's a more powerful win-win opportunity when the vendors do work with solution providers and channel partners to drive those implementations.
Agreed. All right, so what do customers look like from the SaaS world? They typically are medium-sized customers right now, what we're seeing. So about a third of the SaaS customer base is in the range of 100 to 499 employees, which is how we define medium-sized business here at CompTIA. If you look at IDC or Gartner, they often have slightly different definitions of what medium and large and small happen to be, but this is how we do it here. And then again, over to the right, I want to reiterate that this is a big vertical opportunity. There are a lot of channel firms who got into SaaS because they said they thought it could be an entryway into specialization. They thought if they could align themselves with ISVs who have very specific vertical, niche-y kind of vertical applications, and I don't think I need to explain that here, but there are marketplaces all over right now that have hundreds to thousands of very specific applications that, you know, may pertain to, I mean, who knows, some application that is used in a casino, an application that's used in a hair salon, an application that's used somewhere that's very, very specific, and it gives partners a way to differentiate themselves in the field. That said, probably the fastest entryway into SaaS would be more of a horizontal play. So you're selling, you know, Microsoft 365, not to give them a plug, but it happens to be one of the biggest ramps into SaaS for the majority of the channel. So it isn't just a vertical play. I would say that you probably get into this as a horizontal, with the vertical being the icing on the cake once you get your business established. All right, you ready to do SaaS? So what are the steps that you need to take to reorient your business, or at least add this to your portfolio? And I'm going to say here, it's all about people. And we find this across all of the research we've done this year at CompTIA, not just SaaS research, but people. We've got a robust economy at the moment, and everyone who is trying to hire is complaining about not being able to find people. And now when you're trying to hire people with very specific skill sets, it gets tricky. And your alternative then is to retrain your existing staff, and that's expensive. So I think a lot of companies are challenged with the people thing. It's a human resources thing to get to find the right people who are able to sell in a recurring revenue model. That's one of the realities, especially of moving from more product sales to recurring revenue. It's the sales rep that hit it out of the park for you as a selling product may be completely inept at selling services, selling a recurring revenue contract. And that's not to take away from that person. It's just a reality. So they either need to be retrained, or you need to look elsewhere and find somebody from the outside. So I think a lot of companies are grappling with that right now. And then some of the other things are, you then need to reorient everything around what your marketing strategy is. You're a very different company if you're promoting yourself as a SaaS firm as opposed to a firm that sells product or technology services, for instance.
And Carolyn, we could talk in SaaSMAX for hours about what it takes to be successful at, as a vendor, helping a channel partner to get to drive more engagement and sales. And one of the tips that we try to share with our vendors when they first get started with us is that besides having a best practices program, which has all sorts of information that makes it really easy for a partner to understand what they can earn, how to sell, what the key differentiators for the product are, et cetera, but also to even allow them to trail your own direct sales and even incentivize them to do that with you so that they can get it. They can hear the aha moments with the clients. They can experience an implementation. They can see the value for themselves before they take the risk driving it to their own clients. So as a tip for those of you who are vendors on here right now, please consider that a channel partner who's new to your products needs that engagement with you. They need the encouragement and the partnership with you in order to help get them started.
No, I would agree. I think one of the biggest mysteries for a lot of channel firms who want to get into SaaS is how do I make money with it? I think that's been something that companies have been questioning themselves since cloud came on the scene. As can I replicate whatever margin or business that I was doing at the height of my old days, the best business, in this new model? And I think that's been a little bit of a challenge for some companies. And the way to mitigate that, Dina, you're right, is to get vendors to be able to articulate, this is a clear plan, this is a way that you can make money, and we're here to support you. I think that's very important because I do anecdotally talk to companies that just say, hey, I don't know if I can make money with this. And who's best positioned to be able to explain exactly how you can make money than the vendor themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving along here, we asked companies, so all right, you're doing SaaS, what percentage of total revenue did you derive from SaaS in 2016, 2017 when we did this study? I need to note very loudly that this includes all services dollars that were accrued around this particular SaaS engagement. So if 36% of respondents say that they are garnering 25 to 49% of their total revenue from SaaS, that seems very high. A lot of these numbers seem high, but that includes all services dollars. And as all of you in the channel know, services is where it's at. That's where you make the majority of your money, frankly, and it's not on the initial sale of product. And it goes back to why I said that some companies are just getting out of the selling product business altogether, and they're just going in as providers who do integration work, who do customization work, who can just be consultants who are doing consulting work around technology. But I think these numbers, they're a year old, so I with a caveat, I think that these numbers are probably much bigger even today, and they will continue to go on a positive trajectory. All right, speaking of services, here they are. These are the services that companies who are selling SaaS are making some good money off of. Not surprisingly, integration is right up there. So is customization. Those are bread and butter of the channel, even when they're not doing SaaS. Those are where they make quite a bit of their money. And some of these are some of the other peripheral revenue models that the SaaS world is making. And I'd ask you, Dina, if you've seen any changes here. I think initially referrals were kind of a big deal in the SaaS world, and I'm talking a few years ago, but I'm wondering if that is not quite as big as it used to be, and we're talking about more of these other services as a way to make margin.
Now, that's a good question. I think that when it comes to small and inexpensive applications that are very easy to implement, they like to maintain a referral model. Referral doesn't always mean that the vendor understands best practices on how to recruit and onboard and engage and activate a channel partner, though. So we're seeing that whether it's a referral model or a reseller model, that both do require a more traditional best practices in how to understand that a channel partner is an extension of their sales team. So we're seeing a combination, and it really does depend on the size of the cost and I think the target of who the end users are. Referrals are typically more for smaller, less expensive applications for micro and small business. unless it's a very complicated model in which a lot of technical expertise is required for integration and setup. And otherwise, we're seeing a lot of reseller and wholesale actually surfacing and becoming pretty well established and accepted by the SaaS companies that are offering more expensive applications, $100 to a few $1,000s a month type of range.
Terrific. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the changes that are going on in the tech ecosystem. And this is from the State of the Channel study that we did. This sort of puts an underline under some of the things that we've been talking about today. So what are some of the primary catalysts that are forcing some of the channel companies to change, and frankly, a lot of the vendors as well, who have to or are leading the charge in many ways. Emerging tech is moving everybody in new directions, and we're going to dive down a little bit deeper on that in the next section here. And emerging tech encapsulates tons of different things. We tend to use it as an umbrella term, but it really is a bunch of different technologies. Some of them complement and work well together. Some of them are completely discrete from one another. And so we'll talk about that a little bit, but we are looking ahead to the we're post-cloud era, where cloud is an established, fundamental, enabling technology now, almost like the internet. We all use the cloud, and now we're moving on to this next set of technologies that sit on top of the cloud or work in tandem with it. Customer demand, that really comes up in all the studies that we do. Customers are becoming much more savvy. Line of business folks within organizations are doing a lot of their tech influencing and a lot of the tech purchasing. So we're not just working through IT departments anymore. And as a result, they become much more demanding with their providers. And if you're talking a line of business, they're wanting to know if you understand their vertical industry, if you have any business expertise, you can explain to them. They don't care how the technology works. They really want to know, okay, how is whatever you're going to sell me going to, decrease costs within my department, or it's going to help me work on this particular strategic project, or whatever it happens to be. So dealing with more savvy customers is a big deal. And then cloud computing has disrupted routes to market, and we talked about that earlier. There's no longer a linear way to go to market. There's a push-pull. Customers can self-provision, vendors can go direct. You can use a distributor in the middle and work with a partner. There's a myriad ways for customers who are ultimately who this is all about to get the technology that they need and have it implemented. And then I won't go through. We've got a lot to cover here, so I'm going to go pretty quickly, but a very obvious thing that application-specific services are supplanting hardware sales. I think that's sort of a no-brainer, but I think that's why a lot of the companies that may be on the call today and who you deal with in your world at SaaSMAX understand that being in the software as a service business is a good place to be. All right, here's some good news. Cheery, cheery. Folks are more optimistic about the channel. We asked this question last in 2016. So how are you feeling generally? And this is a big general, whatever, how are you feeling about the future of the channel, your business, etc. And typically people always answer on a positive note because everyone wants to think life is good. And so the 63% in 2016 didn't surprise me. I thought that's great. People are pretty happy about how things are going. 2018, that bounced up to 75%. So that's good news. People have, now I don't know if that survives. I think it's a function of a robust economy at the moment, and generally speaking, the tech economy is more robust in some ways than other industries. But this is just a feel-good slide. It's good news, and I hope that it continues. So we asked folks, all right, you're feeling good about the channel. Why? And what do you think is going to be important for the future? And number one here, this has been number one the last 3 or 4 times we've asked this, is cloud computing is opening up new opportunities. And I think that's great because I'm going to be honest with you. When I first came to CompTIA almost 9 years ago, which is hard to believe, we had just established our cloud computing community. And so it was a bunch of solution providers and vendors who got in and we were like, what is this cloud thing? And there were a bunch of ashen faces in every room that I was ever in for meetings. They were like, where's this going to put us out of business? They were frightened. They had no ideas. And we have seen a complete 180 over the last 4 years, 5 years, and seen that now finally, the channel is fully embracing this, perhaps because reality is reality, and they've embraced it. But it's good to see, and I no longer see pale, white, scared faces in rooms anymore, so that's good. I won't go through this whole list because we've got, like I said, a lot to cover, but, you know, broader use of technology, that goes back to those line of business buyers. They think they know what they're doing, and they provision an application, or they purchase a bunch of tablets for their department or whatever they do, and then they didn't actually think about the security implications or how to integrate anything into what they already have, and then they go running to somebody to help them. And if they don't have an IT department, or they have a small IT department, that somebody could be a channel company, or it could be the vendor that sold them the goods in the first place. And we'll talk about emerging tech some more, so let's move on. So what could lead to a negative outlook? I talked about this earlier, and I cannot talk about it more, but the skills gap for not just emerging tech, but for everything is a big deal. And being able to find the right people, the talent shortage right now because of the low unemployment rate, especially in tech, is difficult. So that's something that all companies are facing right now. New types of competitors. So that goes into our whole discussion here about traditional channel versus some of these newer players, which is you folks, some of the SaaS players. This 42% must be the folks that are not going to partner, and they're worried about these competitors. And I would argue that you should get on board with thinking about these types of companies as potential complements to what you do in your business. The rest of these are fairly obvious, you know, general business challenges, and again, as I mentioned, the aging of the channel. So we can move on. So what's needed to ensure an optimistic future? So if a respondent, regardless of whether the respondent was on the glass half full or the glass half empty side of the former questions, we asked them, what do you think? Just to get an optimistic future for the channel, what do you think? And I only show this slide because there's I do these year-over-year studies, and I'm going to be honest with you, sometimes the data just bumps 1%, 2%, 5%. You just don't see a huge change. These top two things here between 2016 and 2018, that is statistically very big. So, you know, 38% were worried about or considered the training and availability of skilled workers to be, you know, the things that would ensure an optimistic future for the channel. That was pretty significant. But now it's up to 54% and 51%, and that's very significant. So people are worried about human resources. It's a big deal, and so it's not about technology necessarily. It's about people, and I think that's important. And it's going to take some money on some of these companies' side. It's going to take some help on the vendor side. So with respect to training, if you're a vendor working with a SaaS or a budding SaaS company, and they're like, how do we do this? Well, who are the right people? We've got this guy here, or this woman here, and how do we retrain them? If you're a vendor and you want to endear yourself to some of your potential partners, provide some of that training. That would be a really good idea as one of the benefits in your partner program. So that's why I wanted to highlight that. The rest of these have stayed fairly consistent year over year, but people are going to be important in the years ahead. All right, so let's look to the future. So a lot of these issues are around emerging tech and what we're going to be doing next in the space. Like what is the next best thing? So we wanted to know from channel partners, what do you think about emerging tech? Are you having a freak out like you did about cloud? Are you excited about it? Are you working with it already? And as you can see here, unlike what I saw in those rooms with the ashen faces 8 years ago, the channel is actually, they're primed and ready and psyched about emerging tech. That doesn't mean they're good at it or they're even doing it yet, but at least they don't have a naysayer attitude. You got 3/4 here saying it's a business opportunity. And that should be good news for all the vendors that are selling that emerging tech, that they have indirect channel or potential indirect channel that's excited about doing so. So what are the specifics of the emerging techs that we're talking about here? Well, we at CompTIA have identified this list here. You could probably find some other things to put on the list. I'd argue that 5 years ago, cloud would have been on this list. I'll argue that in 2 or 3 years, Internet of Things won't be on this list because it will have been mature. And that's, as you can see here, if you, Internet of Things is the one thing on the list that really stands out as having the channel's knowledge and familiarity. So they're already working with a lot of that particular area of technology, whether it is the hardware part of it or the analytics part of it or whatever it is. But all of these are on the minds of channel companies. You see, there's a fairly sizable percentage of folks who have insignificant or no knowledge with many of these, but I expect this whole bar chart to move to the right as we move into the next few years. Okay, so why offer emerging tech? And I put SaaS in that bucket as well. Customer demand. I can't possibly reiterate that more, that customers are bombarded with advertisements about blockchain and Watson and cloud and you name it. And so if they are working with a provider or a vendor, they're like, hey, what about that blockchain thing? Does that mean anything to my business? And so customers are really stepping up, and customers are a lot more savvy today. And I think from a channel perspective and a vendor perspective, they're recognizing that you need to look ahead into what the next best opportunity for your portfolio is, in terms of revenue. And if you get good at it as an early adopter, you then have a competitive differentiation. So if you're like the new guy new partner who understands, you name it, drone analytics, I'll just throw that one out there, but it actually is a thing. And you understand that before all other people on your block understand it, then you're going to be the first to market, and that's a good thing for you. So it's an exciting time. I'll just sort of wrap with that. I think that our emerging tech, SaaS, will enable a lot of these technologies, or be involved with a lot of these technologies. It's going to be really an interesting way for channel partners to dive into some new stuff in the years ahead. All right, some final takeaways, and Dina, you can help me with some of these if you'd like. I think a lot of channel partners are getting reinvigorated about their business prospects. That's what we found in our data. It is going to require many of them, though, to change their business model or continue on their path of transformation and becoming more digital in what they do. And that has not been a fast process for a lot of companies. But to get to the good place that they want to go, they're going to have to continue to make those changes. Emerging tech is going to be a force, and we talk about it a lot at CompTIA, but I want to just put just a little bit of a caveat on it, is that the reality is that traditional lines of revenue are going to still be a big part of at least channel partners' businesses, because the reality is, as you saw in my very first slides, the vast majority, 90%, I don't even know if that's a vast majority, that is the beyond vast majority of channel firms are tiny little companies. They got 10 employees or fewer, and they're $1 million less in revenue, and they can't afford to go, hey, we're going to do blockchain tomorrow. They can't flip their business like that. They got to maintain the money that's coming in from their existing business so that they can pay their employees and they can keep their rent paid and their lights on and all of that good stuff. But one of the things that would be important to differentiating if you're going to get into these areas is to pick a specialty. And I think vendors can help with that. So if vendors can't cover the vertical landscape, they can work with the right channel partners that can help them cover the vertical landscape if they want to enter different industries. It's very interesting time in the channel now to where you decide to play in the market. And then finally, I'll leave you with this, and we can take some questions. The skills gap and training requirements. It's really all about it's all about humans. I mean, you can make a big decision that you're going to get into a new market, you're going to take on SaaS, you're going to take on this vertical, you're going to take on this emerging tech. To do that first, to make that decision without actually backfilling with the right people or making sure that you can find the right people, is going to leave you in a world of hurt. So it's really, I think, incumbent in the year ahead especially, and is to figure out how to find, retrain, and skill up people that are going to be able to help you enter some of the new markets that we talked about today.
Great. All right, so Carolyn, yeah, this is Dina, and I just want to, reiterate what you're saying there. We're seeing more and more that channel partners are recognizing, because they're doing some business with SaaS now and seeing that the revenue can be steady and long-term recurring for a lifetime of a subscription of a customer. And so now we're seeing that they are asking to find more solutions to round out and build comprehensive solutions more and more often. So with the offerings that we're actually rolling out in the months ahead, is the resellers will have the ability to not only find and meet partners, meet vendor partners, but be able to combine them into bundles and stacks that they can then market through SaaSMAX as well. And the partners that we have to help them go to market and market those solutions are also a great advantage for them. So we're very excited about the prospects of moving SaaS into the channel, and think that it's really just the beginning of everything, as we showed you at the early start of this in the early slide, where we showed the opportunity is to go from 20% channel to 40% channel in a market that's growing at 11% compounding each year. So for those of you channel partners who are on right now, I think it's very smart that you are planning ahead and incorporating more and more SaaS into your portfolio. And for those SaaS vendors, I think those who are on this right now and are very smart about getting in on the channel in comparison to your competition. So Carolyn, you did a great job presenting all this data, and thank you for continuing your research on these types of data points over the years. And we look forward to having you next year and seeing what the changes are and the growth curves are. And Laura, I think you have questions that are ready to be asked.
I sure do. So the first question up is the customer demanding for new products that partners are no longer selling, or are they asking for additional products from the same suppliers? For example, are partners searching out new vendors or new products within the same vendors?
All right, I'll try that one. I'm going to be a little bit provocative here, but I frankly think that a lot of customers today are not the vendor is almost abstracted from them if you're dealing in the cloud world. A lot of times the partner is the face to the customer, and the partner is building in as a service solutions for them, and not necessarily leading with and I won't name any vendors, but I am a XX certified this vendor, or XX certified this vendor, and your entire environment is being run by this vendor, because that simply isn't the case for most companies anymore. They're using the cloud. They may have some workloads up on Amazon. They have some that are in-house. So, and as more line of business people get involved in tech purchasing, they're even more removed from whom the vendor is. This doesn't mean that the vendor isn't important. They're super important, but I'm talking about, I think what the customer might be asking about is not going to be specific to that type of request.
Okay. Do you see, Dina, I think this one is for you. Do you see SaaSMAX as a clearinghouse for SaaS applications?
Clearinghouse, I guess so. Depends on how you define clearinghouse, but we definitely do not let just anybody or any SaaS vendor into our catalog. We make sure that they have best practices. We make sure that they have real customers, not just beta. We believe that we make sure that they have reseller agreements and the right kinds of tools to enable their partners to go to market easily and efficiently, and that they are good communicators and know how to treat their partners well. So to that end, yes, I do think we're a clearinghouse. We have some real strong initiatives in the year ahead to bring on more and more cybersecurity solutions, business productivity solutions, and we do have a sweet spot in the O365 ecosystem that we'll be talking more about in the months ahead, and are very excited about bringing that to our partners as well. But we also see a growing number of MarTech solutions in our catalog, and some other and some sales and MarTech related solutions that we're very excited about, as well as business analytics. So we do, I guess you could call us a clearinghouse. Certainly any channel partner who comes to us that's going to meet a vendor through us could feel comfortable that we've vetted them.
Great. Okay, Carolyn, this is for you. For all the data that you shared, can you tell how many responses you got, 50 or 100? What would the number be, and what was the revenue size of the companies that were surveyed?
Okay, this study was 400 respondents, which is typically what we try to do for all of our studies. 400 to 650 is typically what we do. So this was 400. Company size, we build quotas around all of our studies so that we don't get all small businesses or all medium-sized businesses. We screen, and once we've reached our max on how many small businesses we want to be responding, we close that out and no longer take any more. So if anyone out there, whoever asked the question, is interested in having a breakdown by a certain company size, I can provide that. We can slice and dice the data any way you want, but we have all kinds of segmentation based on company size, based on vertical, based on business model. So I'm happy to provide any of that, but it was 400 respondents.
How does SaaSMAX compete with marketplaces owned and operated by Ingram, AppDirect, or even Salesforce?
Oh gosh, that's probably a loaded question. I think that
They also typed great info, so they really enjoyed the webinar.
fantastic. Yeah, I think that, SaaSMAX, the products in our catalog that you will come across with us and through us are most likely products you will not find in those other marketplaces and distribution marketplaces per se. So I would say there are certain things about how we do business, and being a managed marketplace, a proactive marketplace where we leverage our partner optimizer technology to pinpoint and set up the right partners with the right vendors. That's definitely one of the ways. Another way is just our business model and the hand-holding that we do with the partners. And then third, definitely, is the ability within our platform and our model to enable any SaaS business model and any SaaS reseller program to be presented to and do business with the channel partners who we approach. So there's no limiting factors. We create a transparency between the vendors and the partners and don't cut them out of the middle, in that we recognize that the end customers and the vendors will always need to have a transparent relationship, but we want to keep those resellers in the middle. So I don't know if that's a clear enough explanation, but I'd be happy to talk to whoever that question was posed by in a separate conversation and show them more specifically.
Great. It is at the top of the hour, so our webinar time is done for the day. We've gotten to the questions that were asked. I had one thought that came to my mind as both of you were speaking throughout the webinar today. What I really saw is that the MSP reseller and even vendor community going into 2019 requires a really focused strategic plan where they really need to be thinking through that the markets are changing, the people are changing, the education of the people in the markets is changing. So what might have worked before may not be the best way forward to growth in 2019. So based on this data, I would sit down with my leadership team, if I still had my MSP, and go, we need to look at what's coming forward, come up with a plan, devise maybe some new tactics and strategies to grow the markets based on the data that was in this deck. So I thought it was fantastic. That was my thoughts.
Great. And Laura, on top of that, there are some amazing SaaS solutions that are coming to market. And if the partner has the time or has the ability to potentially work with us to help them vet out what's available to them, depending on who their client base is, there are some amazing opportunities. And to be able to bring those to your client base and help them increase productivity, potentially drive sales, improve their security, all of those different aspects of how SaaS can impact a business, they really can look like a hero and also become a very profitable monthly recurring revenue business with steady revenue to cover their growth.
Perfect. And on that note, Carolyn and Dina, thank you so much for being here with us today. If those of you who are on the call or not already SaaSMAX resellers, I have our channel chief, Clinton Gatewood's information up on the screen today. If you need any other information from Carolyn or from Dina or from myself, please just reach out and we're happy to get you copies of the deck or whatever other information you need. Have a great day, everyone, and have a great 2019.
Yeah, happy holidays. And Laura, thank you. And Carolyn, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye, everyone.